What is the most paranormal thing that ever happened to you, /x/?
I grew up in a very strange situation and had lots of paranormal experiences. I didn't put the pieces together until I was in my 20s and learned my mother frequently dabbled with the occult from her teenage years into her 40s when this happened. To this day, I don't think our house was haunted, but my mother was attracting things from a strange house on my street. Grew up in a small 3-bedroom ranch house, but had dreams about falling downstairs for as long as I can remember. Toys falling over, feelings of being watched at night, hearing sounds outside, etc. Pretty normal spooky experiences were common. One day, this all changed in the summer when I was out in garage watching my dad work on his car. I was about 6 or 7. Went back into my house to wash my hands and the house was empty, something that almost never happened with my brother, dogs, mom and dad all living under one roof. As I'm heading to the bathroom next to my bedroom, I feel a chill run down my spine and feel an overwhelming urge to look to my left. In my bedroom behind my toy bin, there is a man in all black with black and white splotches on his face, tall enough to almost reach the ceiling, almost 8-foot ceilings. I start screaming and running into the living room, and my dad rushes in asking what's wrong. I tell him there's a man in my bedroom, and he grabs me and rushes outside and locks me in the car before rushing inside. Seems like an eternity in the hot car before my dad finally reemerges and tells me there was no one there. My father didn't dismiss what I said, and in retrospect, his reaction is very strange. He told me if I ever see something like that again to ask it firmly to leave. We'll continue with more. My dad would explain to me after another similar event the idea of ghosts and spirits in a very dumbed down way so I could understand, and I started to take an interest in paranormal things and became very interested in a house in my neighborhood. For as long as I was old enough to ride my bike around with my friends, we were all creeped out by this house in our neighborhood. Not only was it unusually unkept, but it was the only multi-level in the neighborhood and also the only one with a connected garage. It was built at the same type as the other, 60s, but looked like it was dropped in between the other houses from another neighborhood or time period. Have never seen anyone coming in and out, and despite having an attached garage there were always different cars parked out front. I later learned this was because the house frequently changed hands and was on the market constantly. Another unusual thing for my neighborhood. Parents had the typical American rules where I had to come home when the street lights came on. Unusual house was on the way home from the park, and even when it was on the market and unoccupied, when the street lights came on, a chandelier in the home would also come on with a timer. Always have an uneasy feeling and pedal my bike a little faster when I go by it. One day it's raining out and I had been playing Xbox over at a friend's house. Go to bike home when I see the street light outside my friend's window come on. Biking home when I get the same feeling as I got when I was a kid, right as I'm passing the house. I look over and I see the splotched-faced man staring out the window. I slam on my brakes and almost wipe out in a puddle. I get disoriented, but when I look back up the man is gone. This was the last time I saw the splotched-faced man, but was not my last experience with this house. Years go by and we moved away from the neighborhood but stayed in the same town. Playing Xbox with my friend who still lives there, and he invites an emo girl that grew up a few houses down from me. We catch up and my friend goes to bed and the girl and I stay up all night chatting on Xbox Live, and she asks me to come over. After some convincing I agree to come over even though it's 1 a.m. I had stupid teenager brain and wanted to get pussy, so I snuck out of my house and rode my bike the mile or so over to her house. I knock on her bedroom window and she climbs out. I have my first cigarette with her as we walk to the park and we make out under one of the pavilions. A cop rolls up to the park and flashes his lights. I think my life is over, but he just tells us to go home. I try to keep cool walking back to her house, but my heart is racing. I put my arm around her and we're sharing headphones listening to AFI on a portable CD player. I'm refamiliarizing myself with the neighborhood and flush with hormones, nicotine and adrenaline already, so when I lock eyes with the house it really throws me off. She can tell something's off and asks what's wrong, so I point to the house and tell her that it always used to bother me. She gets white as a ghost. She tells me that the house is haunted because someone hung themselves from the chandelier. I had heard this story before, and while it was spooky as a kid, I knew it was just bullshit kids making up because I didn't think they'd leave the chandelier up. Side note, I have also looked up the property records and confirmed this to be untrue. She continues and says her and her friends broke in there a few months ago and some bad stuff happened. Think she's just being edgy, but I'm interested to know more and pry about it. She tells me they found some old candles in the basement and brought them upstairs and lit them with a Bic so they could see. This edgy metalhead drew a pentagram with a Sharpie he had and started trying to scare them. Everyone laughs him off until they heard a huge thump upstairs. She says one of the kids went upstairs to see what it was when he was chased down the stairs by a large man and they all bolted out of the house. The man screamed at the two girls and went on about fucking them to death and all kinds of horrible shit. I asked her if he had the black and white splotches on his face. I tell her the story I told you guys and she looks at me like I'm crazy despite her lying about the suicide and the story she just told me. She dismisses my prying and assures me it was a homeless man. Energy of the night has completely shifted from teenage hijinks to heavy and somber by the time we get to her house. We exchange goodbyes and agree to see each other again. We never did, and I pick up my bike and start pedaling home. Out of curiosity I swing back to ride past the house. I stop out across the street and the same chandelier is on like always. The mood of the night is unreal. I think it's the first time I've ever been out this late and I've got so much running through my head I kind of just sit and ruminate over everything. I decide I want to see the house up close and see if her story was real about the back door being left open. I get off my bike and walk it around the side of the house to the back and see the door she was talking about. I lean my bike against the house and reach out to the handle, a part of me wishing it was locked. It's not locked and the door opens. I walk inside and am overwhelmed by a strong smell I now know in hindsight is mildew, which I had never smelled at the time. I see the candles in the living room burn down to their base and the sharpied pentagram. These are the scariest thing about the house. It's remarkably normal inside and the fixtures and flooring are all better than my house. Feel kind of let down that it doesn't look like Silent Hill inside and decide to go upstairs. The light from the chandelier is illuminating the house but the area at the top of the stairs is pitch black. I call out, "Hello," to see anyone is up there. Before the word is finished leaving my mouth the light instantly goes off. I hear footsteps stomping upstairs. I fucking bolt out of the house and barely remember to grab my bike. So scared I probably run while holding my handlebars for half the block before I get on my bike. Never look back. Go home and don't sleep until noon. That was my last paranormal experience with the house. I have not been back there at nighttime since.
I moved into my house 5 years ago. The last 2 years there have been strange things happening. It started in October 2004. I noticed strange footsteps, but soon shrugged them off, thinking there was probably an explanation for them. My 16-year-old son, Michael, slept in the only bedroom that was downstairs, while myself and his little sister have our bedrooms upstairs. I would wake up in the morning with Michael sleeping on my bedroom floor. He at first heard strange noises, then he seen shadows moving across the room. He came running from his room one day, because his plug flew from the wall. Yet again, I put it down to electrical faults. He has felt something brushing him too. I have been with my partner Mike for a year now, and he moved in with me in April. At first, Mike couldn't sleep with the noise of someone moving about up and down the stairs. Always checking but nothing there. He would always say,
"Did you hear that?"
I was just used to hearing them. 4 months ago, Mike was sitting at the computer which is beside Michael's bedroom door, and he jumped up with a pain. He lifted his shirt and there was a deep scratch on his stomach. There was no sharp instruments about, and there was no possible explanation for this. The computer always acts up for him, but no one else in the family. I am also catching shadows out the corner of my eye, and put it down to my imagination. We were lying in our bed 2 weeks ago, watching telly. I lie nearest to the doorway, and I see a flowing shadow going into my daughter's bedroom. Mike jumped up and shouted he saw it too. For once I was completely freaked out. I had to sleep on other side of the bed. Everything was forgotten, and then 2 days ago, Mike was sitting on the computer chair again, holding a piece of drawing paper in his lap. The paper hit him in the eye, and took out a chunk from his cornea. He is in complete agony, and has been attending hospital. He cannot explain how the paper hit his eye from the angle he was holding it on his lap, but knows, even if he tried to do it himself it would be impossible. At first, I thought it was just a mischievous ghost of some kind, but now I am starting to get very worried with this thing assaulting my partner. It is no longer mischievous, but evil. I wonder if it is the shadow that has always been with me that I have always seen from the corner of my eye since, or is it something that was already in house? 2 weeks ago my son came screaming from the bathroom, saying he'd seen a face all bloody, and wrapped in a dirty sheet. He killed himself last Friday, and we are all devastated beyond words. His note said,
"I got it, Mom, check the camera."
A couple months ago my friend's cousin, a single mother, had gotten a new cell phone. After a long day of work, she placed her phone down on the counter and started watching TV when her son came to her and asked if he could play with her new phone. She told him to not call anyone or mess with text messages and he agreed to do so. At around 11:20 p.m. when she was getting tired, She decided to tuck her son in and go to bed herself. She proceeded to his room to see that he wasn't there. She went to her room to find him sleeping on her bed with the phone in his hand. Browsing through her phone, she noticed only minor changes such as a new background, banner, etc. and headed towards the pictures section. She began deleting the pictures he took when she came across the last one. When she first saw it, she couldn't believe it. It was her son, sleeping on her bed, but it was as if the picture was taken by someone else above him. It shows the left half of what seems to be an elderly woman's face. Sub/X/. It's been a decade since I've been here, but I actually have a story for you. Happened about a year ago and just feeling okay enough to share now that I'm sure there won't be any heat. Started new position at an college teaching and doing research. College is like 150 years old, there's a good chance you'd know it. My lab is in a new wing grafted into a 100-year-old building. Be cheap as fuck and scrounge for equipment all the time, grant money doesn't grow on trees. Best stuff is in the catacombs. I know, cheesy as fuck, but that's what the students call it. It's just a sprawling series of basements underneath all the science buildings joined by maintenance tunnels. When people retire, stuff is no longer needed, shit gets tucked wherever it will fit down there. There is basically no organization. I've found glassware, old chemicals, high voltage equipment. Lots of shit that really shouldn't be down there and wouldn't fly with ocean nowadays but is really useful. What safety doesn't know want them, so I haul anything I can use back to my lab. One Friday evening I'm in late preparing for an experiment the next week. Forget I need a power supply and don't have one. Head down the stairs into the basement as usual. The older sections are kind of shitty and smell like mildew and only have a few weak lights, so I use the flashlight on my phone to see better. I passed by rooms filled with old furniture, piles of desk phones literally 5 feet deep, and filing cabinets. I got to section where equipment is stored. Noticed one room that is usually locked is open. They must have been doing some maintenance. The basement leaks sometimes and we had a big storm that caused power outages the week before. I looked inside mystery room. It's not stuff I can use, but I couldn't help my curiosity. Filled with late 19th century looking wooden cabinets and storage chests. Started digging through. I find some electrical equipment I can't identify, books, fossils, and herbarium specimens. Open one drawer at a cabinet at the very back of the room. Can barely see shit back here because there is one flickering 40 watts bulb in the front of the room. I shine my phone's light in drawer and saw a wooden box filled with dried oranges. I picked up one of the dark brown balls. Feels papery and crunches a bit when I handled it. I turn it around and there's 2 black holes in whatever it is. It's not an orange. It's a dried baby's head. Oh fuck. MP4. I dropped it back into the box of a dozen other heads and stumbled back against a row of cabinets. I was freaking out. My legs are weak and I stumble back to the entrance and vomit next to the door. Jesus, I picked up a fucking kid's head. I didn't know what to do. I've found questionable stuff down there, but it never went beyond some drug precursors left behind by one chemistry faculty I think had some extracurricular research projects. I'm no archaeologist, but that shit is not normal research material. We haven't even had an archaeology department for 30 years. I ran up to looking for someone. Department head is the only one there. She's an older German lady who recruited me. Nice but very by the book and serious. I can barely get anything out and only found something in basement. She looked mildly exasperated with the interruption and followed me down to the room. I pointed at the box and she opens it and freezes for what felt like an eternity, staring at those black holes in the head I dropped. She slammed the drawer shut and looks at me.
Anon, if you know what's good for your career, you'll help me take care of this problem you've discovered.
She told me this can't get out. There's probably no documentation and the college can't handle police or the media poking around things. They could be taken from backwater colony and we really don't want the PR nightmare of having indigenous child heads in our basement. I reluctantly agreed. As fucked up as it is, I don't have tenure and messengers are sometimes shot here. She pulled out the drawer and piled some discarded papers on top and starts swiftly walking down hallway with it as I struggle to keep up. I ask where we are going.
To the incinerator.
We got to a room in the back of the building complex where the waste incinerator is. It's not used very often now except for sacrificed research animals after we are done with them. She opened the incinerator door, slid in the drawer, locked it, and pressed the run button. The natural gas burners hissed to life and a red glow emanated from the seams of the incinerator door. She told me,
"You did good by coming to me. Let's just make sure this doesn't become a problem for either of us."
I nodded and we walked out of the basement in silence. I drive home and scrub my entire body in the shower and stare at the ceiling until 3 a.m. wondering what the fuck I am doing with my life. We both pretended it never happened and I never heard anything about that room. But the next time I went down in the basement a month later, that door had been bricked over. I'm still haunted by this. Not because of the heads, but the not knowing. Why were they there? All old prestigious schools have rooms like that. They hate to throw things away. But I've never encountered anything like that. I don't know if it was some fucked up 19th century anthropologist bringing back severed heads, or if there was a murderer hiding trophies in the basement. It might sound crazy, but look up what happened to Anila. She was a Yale grad student who was murdered by a lab technician. He hid her body in a wall in one of the research buildings. But the thing that sticks in my mind is, if it wasn't for research, have they been there for 120 years, or 2? I wonder how much stuff like this gets covered up every day at colleges and universities. I got a story, been meaning to post this one for a while. This is back around 2006, early summer. I was just your typical 17-year-old kid. Parents moved around a lot back in those days, but we always ended up living beside large forests, woods, or prairie places. Done plenty of exploring, with and without friends. Ton of stories, but there's always one which makes you look back on with no definite answer in sight, no matter which way you look at it. But this is how it went down. Played a lot of video, and watched a lot of TV. Daps was big in these days. People respected them then, so you can see I was really taken by the whole let's go ghost hunting trend. One of my picks. Near my house there's this big urban forest, kind of like NY Park, split into 3 parts, Forest 1, 2, 3. Through the years, I had a couple strange unexplained events happen to me in them. Phantom smells, lavender, roses, simply faded away as quick as they came. At night, in Forest 2, which had a concrete foundation where probably a house once stood, me and a few friends would see brief bright flashes of light just erupt over our heads with nothing ever there for miles, too close down for planes. It actually lit up the ground around us like if it were a hovering camera flash. Of course, now that I look back on it, it might have been a hunter's camera gadget strapped to a tree or something, one's guess. More pics. Then there was Forest 3, which had a cemetery in it. Caught a ton of EVPs there, chilling ones. Most notable one, I asked,
"Is there a heaven, a hell? Why don't you call for God?"
And a young woman replied to me in a sad tone,
"There is no God."
So there was some freaky stuff going on there. One day I woke up early in the morning, 4:30 a.m. between 5. I recently bought this cheap $70 digital camera from Walmart and was extremely bored with it. So I figured an early walk in the forest should provide me with some unique pictures, which they did if you want to see them. Probably not. But they're all from this day. And we'll post some, so I set out doing the same thing I've done probably 100 tons by now. I'm jaywalking down the streets and after a couple blocks hit the forest entrance, and dive in, and I dive in deep into her. I spend the next 15 minutes just heading to some known places I know would give me some good snapshots, so I take a quickie snap here.
Keep going, man. This is fucking interesting.
And another quickie snap here, thinking to myself,
This is gold, son.
All the while forgetting, the whole entire wood is empty, silent, desolate as I had ever seen it before. I usually run into 1 or 2 people by now, either jogging or walking their mutts, but nothing.
It's a good day,
I say to myself.
Let's carry on.
So I head to this area called the safe zone. It's simply called that on account that it's wide, expansive with a little sand dune and a tall tree smack down in the middle of it, so if you're under that tree, you can pretty much see all paths that string together Forest 1. I'm there, so I decide, let's bar it to the lake. I pick a path from the safe zone and head for it. It is at this time I sense an eerie feeling in the air, like I'm being watched. I ignored it, because at that age I wasn't mature enough to that point where everyone learns to trust your gut, feelings, internal ringing alarm bell, whatever, stayed calm and carried. I hit the lake. I'm tired from walking like 45 minutes of miles. Sun was out but casting gray skies with a sudden in and out drizzle between instances. I perked myself against the ledge underneath the cover of some trees and with a low battery on my camera just decide to hang out while staring bluntly out at this lake that, be my recollection, wasn't swamped by a heavy fog or mist not 5 minutes ago.
First time I seen the place like this,
I tell myself. Then my eyes caught it from the distance. I'm frozen. Pic related. More pics. Got to set the setting. I see a person draped in this loose sheet, what looked to be a black tarp, just simply spinning. Spinning, and spinning around in circles in a pond bush of dogtails. His or her arms open widely as if praising something repeatedly. I'm simply there being as quiet as I can be, not moving an inch, barely releasing a breath observing this mad person. This goes on for about 25 seconds until the spin comes to an abrupt stop. I stare wide-eyed with thoughts racing in my head.
What's going on? What the fuck is this? Should I?
I'm thinking to myself, you got a camera. Don't be one of those idiots who don't capture the shit they so desperately brag about years from now on. Low battery, bars practically invisible, cheap-ass Walmart brand. Don't die on me. I reach for it and look up. And find him looking in my direction. I tell you, I saw no face. It was white, gray, whatever, like a doll. Was it a mask? I don't know, but I was terrified that I was discovered, pinpointed out from my cover. It was far from me, but it still managed to see me in like 4 seconds. So I stare slack jaw, slowly lifting up my camera. In that moment he or it lifts one wide arm out of its tarp and points at him. Just pointing at me from a distance, as if doing some ritual jest, then his arm drops slowly down. You know that scene from Shaun of the Dead where Shaun pushes the zombie chick onto the steel pole and she gets up, while it rotates the film reel on his camera? That's what I did. I lifted my camera up. Another one. Battery officially dead. Then I got up, slowly backed away and ran all the way back to the safe zone, and out a dozen trails and paths, crisscrossing to my exit. That was a crazy ass day, I must say. 2 revealment pics coming up. Picture 1. And second.
What the goddamn fuck? This is the most paranormal shit I've seen on X in a while. Dude, those pics are fucking weird. Just wow.
Actual proof on my ex? Now I've truly seen everything.
Well, that's that. Nothing else can be said about it. Been meaning to get this off my chest for a while. Told a couple of people, but I've never shown them the photos. Fuck greentext. I was around 17 years old, in South Carolina, driving up from Charleston to Dorchester for a party with a friend of mine named Kyle. I was the driver, and he was the passenger. Now, I'd lived in South Carolina for 7 years, and spent another 6 in Sevierville, Tennessee prior to that, and I was in love with the wilderness. Nothing creepy had ever happened in all that time, regardless of how rural or backwoods I'd gotten. So, driving up there, the hour got late. We were on a stretch of lonely road with nothing but woods and swamp on either side of the road. No buildings, no houses, and no real civilization for around 30 miles ahead, and behind us. Conversation was typical 17-year-old dude conversation.
Dude, we're gonna get so wasted. I haven't seen these guys in forever.
And so on, and so forth. I have my eyes on the road, however, in order to make sure I don't slam into some random wildlife crossing by, with no lights, in the woods, at 1:30 in the AM. Visibility was fairly shitty. As I'm talking, I spot something around 500 feet up the road, walking along the side of the pavement, towards our car. As my mind is on driving in convo, my first thought on the figure was probably some hitchhiker, or maybe someone's car broke down. However, as soon as I heard how strange both of those possibilities sounded, I started to watch the figure more closely. 1:40 in the AM, now, middle of the fucking woods, with no civilization for dozens of miles in either direction, and the road is one way. I haven't passed a car, or seen another car, in over an hour. Conversation slows down, as the figure gets closer. I realize something isn't quite right, because it's way too tall, now that it's closer. I'm 5 feet 10 inches, and my friend was 6 feet 1 inch and 245 pounds, but this thing had to have been 8 inches at least, and the body proportions were wrong. The arms dangled far below the hip, with humanesque hands with way too long fingers. I could not make out claws, but who knows, it was dark. The head was bald. The skin was pale gray-white, like a maggot, and mottled brown splotches, which may have been dirt or natural coloration, were mixed in. The eyes were black, large, and reflected light in a predatory way when the truck's lamps shone on them. The legs were bent oddly at the knees, but were quite long nonetheless. Couldn't make out the feet, but the hands were humanish, so I'd presume the feet were, too. The worst part was the mouth. Imagine a human mouth, where the lower jaw has been stretched and distended all the way down to the chest. The teeth were yellow, and sharp. The mouth was red, but had no visible tongue lolling around. Conversation stopped dead. I flicked the high beams on, as it seemed to be quickening pace as we approached, moving in a very jerky and halting manner, and when the high beams hit, it shrieked in a weird, two-toned way, and made to move across the road. Which was bad, because my reaction had been to slam on the accelerator in order to pass the thing by. We locked eyes as I approached, and I introduced the gray-skinned motherfucker to a Ford F-150 doing about 70. When we collided, everybody screamed, me, Kyle, and Stretch Armstrong, and the thing made a pleasingly solid thump upon impact with the right corner of the hood and bumper. The shrieking stopped abruptly and turned into a squalling moan, and the impact sent it hurtling into a tree on the roadside. We kept going. There was no blood, and only minor damage to the truck. I love steel. As we passed it, I told him to check our 6, and he said,
It's down. I can see its legs. It's not moving.
I nodded once, and stayed quiet for another 5 minutes. My friend, who was used to being a badass and playing high school football on the D-line, was visibly shaken. He was in his seat, and he was hyperventilating. I drove the rest of the way in silence, got to the party, said hi so I could get through the door, locked myself in the bathroom, looked myself in the mirror, and probably cried for about 15 minutes. No clue what road. I live in Miami, now, and I'm 27. I don't really care whether anyone believes me. I know what I saw, and I saw it way before I ever even heard 4chan existed, or knew what a skinwalker was. I was a huge nerd, very much into D&D and other crap, so part of my issue was trying to figure out what fucking monster I even saw. It didn't seem to match any description of anything I'd ever heard of. All I knew was, it wasn't human, and we gave it a black eye in exchange for a dented hood and scratched paint, so I knew it was solid and not some kind of ghost, or hallucination. I actually decided to share the story, because some of the skinwalker posts have mentioned them as being gray-skinned, naked men, which cinched up exactly with what I saw. It's actually comforting to know other people have encountered them, and I hope it comforts the people who have encountered them to know that they don't seem to enjoy being broadsided by 3 tons of steel at 70 miles per hour.
Dude, you probably killed a normal person. It's fucked up.
Let me guess, no one ever found the corpse or any other sign of it.
If it was a person, they're dead now. Sucks for them, but they deserved it for wandering around in an 8-foot-tall studio-quality costume with a built-in voice distorter at 1:40 in the AM on a deserted road. What did they think was gonna happen? Get picked up and taken to the party in exchange for a blowjob? Too implausible. Some weird, undocumented thing hanging out and preying on people living on the fringe of society? Sounds scarier, but more reasonable, to me. The fact that this thing found our little encounter unpleasant suggests they may be a big problem for solo humans. But 10, or 20, or 30, heavily armed and armored, combat ready, and supported with vehicular backup? If a civvy vehicle can put it on its ass, I bet human firepower and superior numbers could make sure it never got up again. And maybe they're not smart enough to understand our technology, but smart enough to do what most predators do, go after the stragglers, and nibble at the corners of the herd. Not the herd itself after all. Stampedes can kill a lion, no prob. No idea about the body, for all I know, it may have been killed by the impact. I never looked back, all my pal said was, it's down, and it's not moving, and that was good enough for me.
Where specifically were you at? What highway or road?
It was near Holly Hill. For what it's worth, I don't believe these things are supernatural. I believe they're flesh and blood, with capabilities largely unknown because no one's ever captured one. Judging by the weird, coppery, metallic, rotten egg smell on the hood, yeah, I fucking smelled it to see if there was anything to smell, and judging by the fact that both skinwalker stories and stories about skunk apes, Bigfoot, etc., are all frequently accompanied by bad smells which are generally uniform in description. I suspect they may all be the same thing, or perhaps different subspecies. Large, forest-dwelling, predatory, intelligent, good at hiding, afraid or weary of technology, and apparently capable of assuming different shapes. I rest easy in the knowledge that deforestation will root them out and reveal them, eventually. Until then, my main curiosity is over what their motivation is. Why do they copy humans, and take over their lives, like the changelings and doppelgangers in old stories? Are they on par with human intelligence, or not as bright? This is the one blatantly paranormal thing that has ever happened to me, and it's not so hard for me to fit it into my worldview. If something is not widely known to a society which thinks it knows everything already, they tend to dismiss it as fable.
Yeah, but if you recovered the corpse later, you could have been famous. But if it was a hostile creature, you did everyone else a favor by killing it, nonetheless.
No way in hell would I have stopped, gotten out, and checked to see if it was dead. Think about it. If it was alive, it'd be pissed. And I'd be an unarmed 17-year-old in the dark versus something that could survive a collision with a truck. If it was seemingly dead, and I tried to load it into the truck, and it turned out it was just taking a nap. I'm fucked, once again. My life was more important to me than possible fame, and on top of that, priority number one was putting as much distance between me and that thing as possible. If you'd seen the thing's face, and mouth, and the sheer size and way it moved, it didn't exactly scream friendly. It screamed, but I didn't even hear friendly once. What I heard was, "I'm going to come over there and make your insides come out, where they can't do you any good." I wasn't trying to even run it over with the truck, the road was narrow, I had no room to swerve. I made to pass it by, it made to cut me off, and I guess it ended up regretting it.
Notice I said later, as in several hours for the next day, preferably with a fuck ton of friends and weapons.
I don't know about that. I had a very bad unexplainable experience one night. Never saw what it was. Basically, I had been smelling a dead animal around my house for a few days. I took every effort I could to find it, only to find one bone. The smell came suddenly, stayed for a few days, and left suddenly. The day before the smell was gone, and I found the bone. Had to have been from a moose. It was huge. I had the bad experience at night. I was in my home, in my bedroom, watching TV late at night, all alone. I smelled the dead animal smell again, but this time inside my fucking house. I grabbed my Beretta handgun, loaded it, and part of it went missing. When I wasn't looking directly at it, a part that was required for function, the main recoil spring, blew my mind. There is no way to remove this part without field stripping the pistol. I grabbed my machete and pumped myself up, and cleared my house. Smell went away. Hasn't been back since. Since then I have upped my arsenal, and have cleared the woods around me. No sign of the smell or what the fuck it was. I'm not sure firearms would work against it, if they even fired. Location, Northern Maine.